Oh, I seem to have another one. So I'll introduce you only. Okay, we're back. So I hope you've got caffeine. This is a 2.5-hour stint. Okay, the doors are being locked. No one is to leave. If you have an urgent toilet reason to leave, raise your hand. We might let you out. Otherwise, see you at 6:30. Right. The first of our sessions for the final 2.5 hours is chaired by Eric Hunter. He is going to tell us all about it. It's about modernisation. Over to you.
Thanks. How's everyone doing? All right. What we're going to do first with this panel is going to be a little different what we've been doing today. But to start, I'd like the panel to introduce themselves. So Alex, starting with you on the way over. Let's go.
I'm Alex Hamilton. I used to be a grown-up lawyer. I was a partner at Latham & Watkins and had a Jerry Maguire moment about 8-9 years ago and left to found Radiant Law in 2011, now the CEO of Radiant Law.
David?
Yeah, David Jones, Business Development Director for Big Hand in the UK. I've been in the industry for over 15 years, worked with law firms of all shapes and sizes, and I find myself looking after our sort of top 30 law firms globally at the moment.
Right. Jan.
So I'm Jan Irwin. I'm Head of Community Success at Pacama, and we're really here to help IP attorneys and IP owners get the most out of the technology that we have to hand.
And I'm Eric Hunter. I'm a Managing Director for Spherical Models, a futures consultancy focusing on human behavior and technology, mainly for companies outside of law, and also CTO for a law firm, Bradford & Barthel. And that's it. Thank you very much for your time. No, just kidding. So what we're going to do at this point is actually that first bullet you see, establishing a target operating model. What I want you to do, since this is Future Lawyers Conference and that kind of a theme, at each table, talk about what your ideal target operating model would be. This does mean you have to talk to each other, and you're going to have about 5 minutes to do this while we walk the room and help facilitate what's happening. Clear as mud?
Tell us what the target operating model is.
That is up for you to help interpret amongst your table what that means. Ready? Go. Let's go, gents.
So, yeah, yeah, no. Oh, a bit louder. Fantastic. All right.
Yep. Couple more minutes.
that you kind of think,
All right. Gonna have to call the panel back up. Let's go ahead and wrap up our discussions, and we'll go ahead and talk about it a little bit. All right. So, target operating model. What were some of the ideas that we had, some of the feedback? This table right here. Sorry, real quick. I got you. Gotcha. Yeah. There you are.
So one of the themes that came up on our table was ownership and size of the firm and who's making the decisions. And if you've got quite a small number of partners, that can sometimes dictate, well, very much dictate the operating model and can make more sense to a smaller number of people in the firm than perhaps long-term moving forward.
Got it. No, that's great. Thank you. How about this table back here?
Hi, good afternoon, Jonathan Silverman. The first thing we say is that the partnership model is broken, so definitely don't go there. And perhaps a perfect operating model, if there was one, would probably be a John Lewis-style arrangement, where there was full engagement of everybody who's in the business, so that actually that benefit and the risk got shared throughout the firm to give us really strong motivation.
Got it. All right, thank you. All right, we'll do one more.
Eric?
Volunteers? Yep.
The Slater and Gordon table.
Okay. Somebody.
I'm from Big Hand, so that would be a bit.
There you go.
Hi, I'm Christian, CIO at Slater and Gordon. For us, our target operating model is very much about consistent working
A little
practices.
louder. Just
Apologies. Is very much about consistent working practices, bringing all the business together with a single way of working, hopefully reflecting best practice. On the basis of the lawyers adding value where they need to add value, and us using automation and technology where the lawyers don't need to add that value and it can be done a different way.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let me bring this up here. Let's go ahead and go to our panel with this question then. Based off of your facilitation, what you were hearing, and your own perspectives, what do you think? Alex, let's start with you.
Well, I think the partnership one was interesting. Don't go to a partnership, because I heard we've got to have partners and associates, and then don't do partners and associates. And I think that's actually, to me, the real question facing everyone, and how you might start to answer the question, why is nothing really changing, right? Because everyone's coming to these conferences, and there are a lot of them now, and I've got this wonderful trip going where I go around Eastern and Central Europe and talk at one and try to cover off several countries a year. And it's a good wheeze, but the reality is that what people are seeing out there is is very different to what's being said on the stages, I think, and that it's not really changing. And I think the reason for that, a lot of it comes back to the business structure of law firms. So should I talk a bit
Could you elaborate more on that? Yeah.
So I think there are 4 fundamental problems with the way a traditional law firm operates. I think the first is we track time. And I'm not saying we should get rid of the billable hour. I think we should get rid of timesheets, full stop. And while we're incentivizing people to spend more time on stuff, we're not going to get them to behave in different ways. The second problem I think we've got is law firms can't make decisions because decision-making cannot be centralized in a partnership structure. In fact, we've created, I believe, the optimal structure to stop things from happening with a group of individuals. And there's kind of a debate going on in the backwaters of Twitter right now, whether you can just say, you know, it's all about lawyers being conservative and so on. I think there's a good argument to say that everyone's crap. No one really wants to change. It's the problem in every area, but it's not like lawyers are great at this. But you've basically got a group of people who are really, really good at pointing out problems with things, and you give them a veto. And there's fabulous stuff by Laura Empson on this, professor at Cass Business School, who looks at kind of how law firms work and partnerships work generally, and fundamentally the senior partner and the managing partner will be operating at the beck and call of a number of stakeholders not always identified in the org chart, who will be the rainmakers and so on, and who did brilliantly under the current system. So they basically hamstrung and not able to actually do anything. The third thing is that law firms can't invest. We have an absolute expectation that we will completely empty the coffers at the end of every year. And, you know, Bruce McEwen from Adam Smith Squire has pointed out for many years now that there's no concept to retain earnings in a law firm account, and that 90-something% is pulled out every year. So there is no real investment culture. And then I think the result of this is that there are no vectors in law firms to implement change. So what you're seeing, if you read the FT Innovative Lawyers and so on, is the reality is that there are lots of very smart people out there doing very, very cool things and, you know, doing a project. But what you never see is their partner down the corridor doing the same thing. And there is no way of getting a good idea across the partnership. And therefore, my sense is this, on this question, which is absolutely, I think, fundamental to everything we talk about today, is that the model is utterly broken and that partnerships are unable to deliver innovation going forwards. And I'm getting a lot of nods in the room, and I'm guessing everyone nodding here works in the broader context of business services or supporting or anything else, not necessarily the partners, who the managing partners in survey after survey are giving up on because they can't get their partners to do anything. So I think this is fundamental and has changed. Oh, and by the way, it is impossible to change a partnership for the same reasons I gave you.
All right, show of hands. Who here agrees with Alex's take right now?
What's number 4, Alex?
No vectors for innovation.
Wow.
There's no way of getting an innovation spread within a partnership.
Okay.
You just have pockets of innovation.
Anyone disagree? Show of hands.
Come on.
All right, all right. Why?
So I think that forward-thinking partnerships set up a board structure.
I've got you. Thanks. There, sir.
So I think there are some partnerships that are a bit more forward-looking, and will set up a sort of corporate board type environment where really they're setting the pace of things, and you can have a situation where they will allocate a budget for innovation, whatever that is, front office, back office, marketing, you know, whatever it is. That the knack is, and it's one of your 4, is trying to keep the pay levels or remuneration packages that they want for the firm. But that does change as well as you come in with, how do I say, the old guard vacate and new people come in who are more corporate savvy, I'd say, and understand more about investment and return. But absolutely, yeah, getting retained earnings is a challenge.
I think the argument against me is to be like a company, right?
Gotcha. All right, up this way.
Just picking up on the last point, you're just saying effectively the partnerships can't change. I think there are a number of ways in which you can get a partnership to change. One is through the fear factor, that everything that's good is not going to continue. And the other one is the possibility of introducing external capital. Because one of the problems with law firms is, as you say, there's no investment. People take out every penny every year. But they're also obsessed with another thing, which is the value of their capital accounts, which they believe is a positive and which a banker will regard as a negative. And as soon as you can convince a partnership that actually the business actually isn't worth anything, suddenly they wake up. And what you've got to do is you've actually got to you've got to explain the process to them. And you've got to get lawyers to start thinking as business people. And once you get that message across, it will seep down through the ranks. And it isn't necessarily the older partners. Sometimes it's the younger ones who've got the challenge because they need the most money. But I think it's a matter of changing the psychology if you're going to keep to a partnership model. And maybe it's a transitional thing. You go from partnership to corporate, and then you share the equity throughout the business. But that's got to change. But I said the introduction of external capital, and also where you're now getting some firms who are becoming very acquisitive, that gives some opportunity for partnerships to change. But it certainly is a challenge.
David, a response to some of the positive ways that we can go forward with change.
Yeah, I think I do agree in part with what Alex is saying, but we have seen isolated instances, I think, in the last 24 months, 36 months of law firms being quite innovative and embarking on change programs. The actual process of being able to deliver change in a large legal organisation is not something that's easily done. You have to get your ducks in line, you have to have the right stakeholders, and you have to have people with a clear vision of where you want to get to. And during that period when you're trying to implement that change, you will have people who will backslide, you'll have people that were bought in who suddenly are no longer bought in. So it's not an easy process. My advice from looking back at some of the projects that we've worked on, and we've helped a number of law firms with their transformation projects on their back office processes and teams, is that evolution is better than revolution. Trying to do things in one big hit is a real challenge for the culture of a law firm. But if you can try and implement a procedure or a process with the right people involved, which is based on sort of minimum viable projects where you prove a new way of working in one particular area of the business, I think that's where you'll see the most success, and that's where I think you can change that culture in law firms from being resistant to change to actually embracing change.
Got a question right here, or a comment.
Well, just to comment on the it's broken, it's not broken. It's very, very profitable. And there's a massive disconnect. Massive numbers of clients don't enjoy what they pay for their legal services, but they carry on paying. So it may be breaking, but it's not broken. I've been trying to break it for about 10 years and have failed. So we may be on a journey here, but it's certainly not broken.
I think that's a really important point. I think it's what you're getting at is absolutely right about perspective, right? You know, and Richard Susskind always had that line about, you know, difficult to tell a bunch of millionaires, you know, the business model's broken. But I think there was a comment earlier, because someone texted me on my taxi on the way over here of like, you better talk about what the client, because no one seems to be talking about that, and that's quite normal in these events. And I think from the client's perspective, it is utterly broken. So whilst law firms are absolutely making money, and while some are looking a little bit shaky and people starting to turn up to these kind of conferences, there are plenty of people still millionaires. But from a client perspective, I think it is fundamentally broken. And I think from the broader perspective of, we're a guild, right? And we had a basic deal, which is we got a monopoly on legal services on the basis that we help people navigate the law. And I think we've completely failed as a guild to live up to our side of the deal, because that broader access to justice is beyond dispute, completely and utterly broken, right? But even in the commercial world, I think in-house lawyers are pretty unhappy, and I don't think they're the real client. I think the real client is the business beyond, and they're completely unhappy.
80% of the population hasn't had access to legal services for decades.
Right.
It's been broken forever. So what?
Yeah. So the comment was 80% of the public for decades haven't had access to legal services.
Jan, what would be your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. I mean, what we're hearing a lot is this kind of, this discussion about whether it's broken, whether it's breaking, whether it's fine, whether, things will change. I mean, ultimately, when you speak to clients, and we speak to clients quite often, as you'd hope, but the people that we end up speaking with are the people that are looking for change. And ultimately, they're looking for change because they're pissed off. They're pissed off with not having transparency around the things that they're working on, not having transparency around their billable options or the work that's being done for them. And at some point, when enough people are pissed off, they look for alternative options. And it's one of those things that's the thing that really leads to a shift in how people work. It's the mindset change of someone going, I'm done with this, and fundamentally I disagree with this approach. And what you'll soon realize is that it doesn't matter how big the firms are. It doesn't matter the fact that they are millionaires now or they will be millionaires in the future. Because ultimately, in business, and law is no other business than anything else, it's not about the biggest firms beating the smallest firms. It's about the fastest firms beating the slowest firms. And if you're fundamentally bought into the idea that the way things are working are fine, then you're at a mental disadvantage and you will be slow to react. And I think that's what we certainly see from our clients and the ones that work with us, is that these are, from larger corporates to smaller kind of startups, they're all looking for more ways to be agile, and law has to get a part of that. And yeah, that's kind of what we see, and that would be my comment on that.
Got a comment right here.
Yeah, so Matthew Brovac from Sky, speaking on behalf of in-house lawyers and just how pissed off we are. So, a couple of comments. I mean, first of all, you should be aware that big in-house teams are here looking at the tools that are out in the corridor and in the foyer in order to buy them directly, not to buy them through lawyers or through legal firms. And when we buy those tools directly, and they are coming down in price and they're now becoming available in a way that they weren't available or weren't cost effective only 2 years ago, then we will do a better job of triaging stuff so that a whole bunch of stuff that currently goes to external law firms just won't go. It just won't leave the building. So I think that's an important thing. And therefore also I've heard discussions, we had a discussion this morning about large amounts of DD work that's being done by paralegals and junior associates at the moment, isn't going to happen, and we're going to use AI and we're going to do all of that. That's great, and I think that's absolutely right. And some of the law firms said, well, that's a real positive because it's going to keep our people motivated, because nobody likes doing that work and they all leave afterwards. Well, that's true, but the point is also, I'm not going to pay for it, because I know that you're using AI in order to do it. And so, I think one of the big challenges for law firms that are fundamentally based on a pyramid structure at the moment is, how are you going to retain and train up talent for the future if I simply refuse to pay for the bottom layer, of the pyramid? And those profits that are currently being taken out at the top of the pyramid, they're not going to be the same level, because you're just not going to have that same kind of broad base of billable hours at the bottom. I will pay for strategic advice from really top-notch, top-quality lawyers who can really bring something. But what won't get paid for is a whole bunch of, that lower-end stuff that's currently being done. In terms of the question about whether it's broken or breaking, I think you just have to look at the wave of consolidation amongst mid-sized firms in this country in order to show that things are under real pressure. There has been huge amounts of consolidation in that space because people are trying to squeeze out the last little bit of efficiency in order to kind of keep the pyramid going. And for the people who are kind of 3 to 5 years away from retirement, probably fine. For the people who are currently senior associates or junior partners, I think it's a real challenge. Thank you.
So, panel, no pressure. How do you retrain the pyramid? And let's bring in back office and front office innovation and transformation in doing so.
I guess one area I can talk about, and picking up the point that was just made, is that for years law firms have had a very precise understanding of exactly the number of billable hours that their lawyers are actually billing, but do they have an idea of what the cost of actually processing that work is? And we're astounded to know that they don't know it. They have sort of rough spreadsheets that give a finger in the idea of exactly what it's cost on the back office to actually produce that piece of work. So one of the things that our business does is we shine a big light on that. We look at providing law firms with the ability to understand what it's actually costing for that work to be delivered. And until people have that as part of their DNA, until they're understanding what it's costing us to produce this work and exactly how profitable that matter is going to be, it's going to be impossible to be able to respond to the likes of the in-house teams who want more transparency. They want to know exactly what that piece of work's costing. And if you have managed to produce or use technology to reduce that cost, they probably want you to share some of that information and share some of that cost saving with you. So transformation projects and working with your clients to understand what things are physically costing to deliver is really important, and we're astonished by how few firms actually have that information.
Jan, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at back office kind of functions and transformation, at the end of the day, it really does always come down to resources, right? It's who are the people that are going to be doing the work, and is their time being used to the best of their ability? And I think Alex is absolutely right, and in the sense that it's not it does feel like a little bit of a pyramid scheme when you've got people working very hard, when you can looking at things like automation that are simply doing the back office work better. It's very hard to kind of say this is something that we should carry on doing. So really, as a back office transformation, what you really need to be doing is looking at what is the value add that back office staff can do that cannot be automated. And there are some elements of that. And I think the comment that the gentleman over there said around providing strategic advice, I think is absolutely fundamental to that. The issue is that there is no incentive to do that, because when you're stretching people and when you're consolidating businesses, you're looking to make efficiencies through cuts. And going back to Alex's point, you're not looking to invest that, and you're not looking to look at ways to improve the future of how you kind of build up the firm and add value to what you're providing. And I think that's kind of a real key issue, is that while that mindset's in place, that there isn't going to be much room for kind of improvements in back offices, because the context of where someone works around isn't supportive to making those changes.
We've seen actually some people do this bit rather well. So we worked with a top 30 law firm recently where they did a whole transformation piece around the back office. They wanted to redesign it for the next 5 years. They wanted it to be a first-class service to the business. They wanted it to be fit for purpose for the next 5 years. And the COO at this particular firm took a brave decision to take that on, politically a difficult thing to do. Within a period of 7 months, he delivered to that business a recurring saving of 1.5 million every year after all costs are taken into consideration, which is a very large sum of money. And I think the speed at which you can deliver change or improvements have a really big say. If you can change the dial that quickly, then I think partners are very interested. But it takes those sorts of numbers, I think, for the owners of law firms to get interested in the first place.
Fantastic question.
So back to the reinvestment piece.
Could you repeat that for us? Sorry.
How much of that amazing saving did the clients see, do we think? I mean, I think this is part of the problem, that law firms investing in technology is great, but it doesn't actually translate out the front door. So from a client perspective, we're in the same boat. It doesn't make any difference to me. I'm actually not that interested. Yeah. But I mean, unless it...
Well, the law firm in question, and this was someone very senior, did say that we will use this money to reinvest, and there's lots of things that they're doing that suggest that that is the case. Now, this may be the exception rather than the rule that I'm talking about, but there are certainly some pioneering firms or brave firms that are doing this. I think you've got to be in a relatively strong position maybe to take that approach. But we are starting to see it, but it is early days.
But Jonathan, you're right? I mean, the starting point for all of this has to be, what do clients need, and how can we create value by meeting those needs, right? Everything has got to be about that, and the back office is really just a very small part of that. But it's kind of part of it because it's by definition the back office, right? Everything starts with, how do we create value for clients, and that is including reducing the cost to clients, right? Because legal services are too expensive, and we kind of break you guys. We priced ourselves out of the marketplace, and that's why Sky and everyone else is busy building in-house teams because they're doing a classic labor arbitrage play. And now they found out about technology, right? So they're not even going to have to go to you to buy technology for it. So it's going to move beyond labor arbitrage to actually transformation of how you deliver legal services. And and suddenly you've got a real competitor who are also the people you're asking for work. So I think you're right. The fundamental question is about needs and client needs and meeting them. And I think it's interesting about the fact that no one's got any data about how they do it, but I'm very nervous. I treat data like that with great skepticism and nervousness, because if you figure out how much time it's, for example, taking to do a piece of work under the billable hour system, right, that is not the same as asking the question, how should this work be done in order to deliver the maximum amount of value at the best possible price to a client? And so I think we're in danger of doing a bunch of work to get data, and data should generally be helpful, but then entrenching bad practices through that.
Could you give an example from Radiant Law? What you guys are doing?
That was so weird. Yeah, so we do kind of manage legal services mainly, so we work with Sky, doing kind of day-to-day contracts and large commercial projects, and we build tech and so on. And typically, we are helping in-house teams be able to do more strategic work themselves by getting the kind of the simpler work off their desks and just kind of nailing that and giving them the control and the pricing and so on, so they can, it's all fixed price, so that they can actually go, okay, we've got that bit tamed. I don't have to worry about it, right? I'll be asked for the right question at the right time. I can get on with basically doing the sexy stuff, right? So that's kind of how we work with in-house teams. And as part of that, we probably reinvent how we resource deals and so on. At least every 6 months we change it. So it's iterating a lot, and we don't keep timesheets.
David, go ahead.
Yeah, just the one thing I was going to say is that some of the sort of top 30 law firms that we've worked with, what they're all starting to do is ask what it's actually costing to get this work done, and that they are being driven by data. As part of that process, we're working out who's working on the different levels of work within the business. And if you have that information, then you have a better chance being able to free up people to do the thing that they're designed to do. So the concept of specialization seems to work really well, whether it's at the back office or the front office. But we've seen classic examples across every firm's size of law firm where if you take a back office job like, I do something basically like photocopying, be amazed how many of the top law firms have very expensive legal PAs on £50,000 a year doing photocopying, when there's perfectly good people in one of their low-cost centres who could do that for 40 or 50% less. So there's lots of areas to improve within these businesses, but you need data as your starting point to understand where you can make some of those changes.
Or stop using paper.
Stop using paper.
I think that actually hits on a really important point, and I think it's something that you kind of were mentioning, which is it's great to make data-driven decisions. It's a great keyword. It sounds fantastic, but ultimately you do need to look back and kind of say, is the work that's being done valuable? And I think that you've absolutely nailed it on the head by saying, yeah, the PAs are spending far too much time, doing the photocopying. But the real question is, why are they using paper? And that's one of the risks of using data to kind of fundamentally make your decisions for you, is that you miss out on the wider conversation that's not being had by scrutinizing just data points. So yeah, I think that's.
I'm not saying don't do data, right? I'm just saying don't accept that that's the right answer for what it is now. I mean, this is all basic lean, right? It's been kind of talked about in other industries for a long time now. About what Toyota does. It's all about value-added steps, getting rid of waste, which is, the vast majority of what lawyers do, and just focusing on the things that actually add value or are absolutely necessary.
In adding the value side, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, sorry, that wasn't clear. Yes, lean, exactly.
In adding the value side, the pricing and profitability. So if you're going to put together a value around pricing and profitability that engages, you want to deliver a quality product for the client, so they're going to be able to see the quality product come from it. But then the leadership, the CEO leadership team wants to say, how is what we're going to do with pricing and profitability going to be beneficial for the firm today, 3 years and 5 years down the line? How would you guys tackle that kind of response as far as the business model goes?
It's not my area of expertise, but Big Hand has recently acquired a company that does exactly that, DW reporting, so it's something I'm very keen to hear other people's answers just now. But having just come from a meeting with a law firm this morning where we met with a pricing director, he talked about all the pressures that they're under from their clients, who are asking, for all sorts of different models. How do you actually go about managing that within the business? It struck me that systems was one aspect of it, but there were a number of other things that need to be lined up beforehand. The culture within the firm, around this type of activity, making sure that people are incentivized correctly. There's a lot of work for law firms to do before this can really take hold within businesses. But again, how can you be pricing accurately if you don't know the profitability of a matter? And if I was a buyer of legal services, I'd want some form of transparency on that. So it's a tricky one, and I think law firms are going down that route. And I've seen a couple of examples of very good applications of pricing policy, but I think a lot of them have a long way to go.
I don't think we should be transparent at all. That's terrible to say. The guy I think is really, really good on this is a guy called Ron Baker. Wrote books like Firm of the Future. It's fabulous on this. How I'd approach that topic is start with maximizing value, right? So when you charge a client, you're obviously reducing the client's profit, right? Everyone's got to make a profit in a transaction. So you want to maximize the value to the client, which sets the total value being created by the service. And then the question of how much you can charge of that, right? So the more value you create, the more you can charge. Then you've got to charge an amount that the client can live with, all right? The client's happy with, that they're making a profit on top of that. And then there's a question, this again comes back to the car manufacturing industry, of can you actually deliver that service, right? So this is called target cost pricing. And the next step is to figure out how much would it cost you to deliver it and whether that is worth delivering because that leaves you enough profit. Right, so that's how car manufacturers do this. It's not complicated. So forget the billable hour and all that, because that has no bearing whatsoever on actual value or costs. It turns out when you do the math, it is about how much is it going to actually cost us in order to do this. This is hard to do with the current way the maths of law firms work, right? Because it's in an owner-manager situation, it all gets messed up in the hourly rates and everything else. But that's how we do it.
Quick question for the audience. How many here have clients that want you to work with an hourly engagement as far as your pricing goes? As opposed to, so one, anybody else, billable hours? Your clients want you to still work in billable hours. So not too many. Okay, how many their clients are predominantly then all alternative fees, flat fees? Okay. Okay. Based off of that, what would be your response be?
So I think it's quite an interesting one. I mean, pricing fundamentally, I think it's fairly simple, right? It's a piece of work that you're going to do for a set price. You ask one person, you get one result. You ask 50 people, you get 50 results. What's not really happening enough, and something that we kind of see quite a lot, is that there's this certain analogy of being tied to the waist with the law firm that you work with. And that's great when they're adding value. That's great when they're doing something that's really pushing you forward and helping you create some dominance in the market that you're in. But it's not so great when you're not looking at where you could be more efficient with them. And it comes back to pricing, because ultimately a lot of the work that's being done, whether that's drafting, whether that's PCT applications, whether that's trademark work, that's something that you can ask more than one person for, and it shouldn't be an awkward conversation to get that pricing information very early on. You should be at the point where you can say, okay, I have a PCT application, I'd like to enter this in China, the US, wherever that might be, how much will it cost me? And you should be checking that. you should be checking with more than one person to say, is this accurate? Why are there discrepancies in what one person's charging and what another person's charging? Because if you're not, then you're just going with whatever's being said and, and you're married to them. Now, what's quite interesting about the profitability side is that what we love about the customers that we work with is a lot of them are startups. But one thing all of the customers that we work with have in common is they're innovators. And you know, we're in a quite a fortunate kind of place here, in the sense that I imagine a lot of the people in this room today are innovators. What's more interesting is, how are you building in their innovation and their success in the way that you're pricing your products? Because I can tell you how we do it. The way we do it is we essentially say, look, I fundamentally believe in your business, and I believe that as you grow, we will grow with you. And that's how we take care of the profitability side of it, is that we say, okay, how can we make this really efficient on the pricing side? How do we give you more than one option? And then from there, you can, as you grow and as we help you grow, that's where we'll start seeing the profits. Because we believe that the more work you generate, the more innovations that you have, the more money that you put into R&D is better spent doing those type of things. And as a byproduct, not as a main focus, as a byproduct, we will grow. And I think that's how I think modern companies are looking to kind of work with their IP firms. That's certainly where we're picking up a lot of our clients.
The R&D perspective, how many firms here have an R&D budget that you're aware of? All right, all right, all right. What would be some of your recommendations for some of these firms that want an R&D budget of any kind relative towards their specific passion, what they're interested in? How do you start that conversation to get that going? Because it's a very astute point, but sometimes it's getting that conversation going that can be the most difficult side. What could be a tangible takeaway for people here to come back with? Again, no pressure. It's a tough question.
I guess you've got to get the right people around the table, and I think it's important to have stakeholders from across the business, the elite within the firm at the moment and the future, and then the other stakeholders like innovation and technology, and I think they just need to work together. And rather than picking off large projects, look to make small changes and try and change the culture within one particular practice group. It seems to me that as Alex has alluded to, the structure of the firms at the moment makes that very, very difficult. So firms need to start bringing in long-term planning around and almost to the side of the existing model that they have in place. And it's a transition process they're going to have to manage. But it's going to be difficult for these firms. I think it will be when a large client leaves is when they're likely to get their wake-up call and actually make some serious changes.
Alex, what would you think?
You just allocate it. Right?
Right.
And you just make a decision and you just say, we should be investing for the future, and therefore we're going to put this money aside, and it's just fundamentally a case of what you should be spending on.
Could you, one more time with the mic, sorry.
So what you need to do is put a skunk works in place. Put your R&D spend into units that are not part of the mainstream offering, where they can go away and experiment. They understand the firm, they understand the market, and they can do the research freely and effectively. When you try to get innovation within a normal business structure, it's very, very difficult.
So Eric and I were debating this last night over several beers.
With the rain and the storm.
With the rain and the storm, it was very dramatic.
Added to it,
And so you were talking about the lab, right?
Yeah.
And the skunk works. Concept of having a lab, and I think that's possible. We actually do the reverse. So what we do is we have developers often, so a lot of it's software side, who are, we basically just say, fine, we're going to have Andre building this or Christian building that or whatever, and then we don't have any emails internally, so everything's on Slack. It's very trendy. And so there's a channel, right, where the developers are on there and all the lawyers come on. And what we've got is this culture now where they just come on and say, could we try this or can you build that? And we can typically write the first cut of it within a few days. So you've got an iterative release cycle and all the software where it's being pushed out at least once a month, typically 2, 3, 4 times a month. And so therefore you get this kind of feedback going where people are asking for help on real-world actual problems faced right now that's driving them crazy. You find a quick solution to it. They write nice messages and get happy, and then they're more likely to ask for it. So that's how we do it. So it's the antithesis of the skunk work thing, and I like the skunk work idea. The thing that worries me about it, though, is that it's how you get people to change in their day-to-day behavior that seems to me the biggest challenge facing law firms. And what worries me is that people go away, come up with this amazing idea which never quite has an impact.
Now, real quick, because I'm going to get hit with a tranquilizer gun if we don't end on time. So we'll get to the question. But Alex, let's say that amazing idea is put forward. There is some change taking place. Then how do you review an audit? Because as we know, sometimes with technology, we have or people, processes, management, things are put in place. It's put in place, and then time goes on. And when I worked in the high-tech industry, the mantra was you had to move in tune with Moore's Law. Every 18 months, you had to redesign what you do was the theory. Otherwise, you're not moving forward. So if you have some changes put in place, what are the review and auditing mechanisms, strategies that you can have to make sure things continually move and transform?
What do you think? So the main mechanism for us is around clients, funnily enough. So we have a quarterly continuous improvement cycle. So on every account, for every client, they've got to come up with 4 improvements for the account agreed with the client at the beginning as useful, and then we improve the account 4 times every quarter. So that's about 16 times a year. And as part of that, they're encouraged to go and look at what's in the marketplace as well as what we can build and what we can tweak and what we can change. I think the thing that's most important for us is actually throwing away technology is more important than the rate at which we absorb new technology. So that we're quite keen on that. We typically put a system in about over 1 or 2 weeks. The teams are quite traumatized now and used to fast changes. But that also means we just rip stuff out as well when it's trying to simplify it. It's hard. I think we've thrown away at least all the, half the code that we've written so far we've thrown away by now because there's always a new thing coming into the market and so on. So quick experimentation, make it client-focused about where it adds value for clients and throw stuff away a lot.
And embracing the failure with the throwing it away.
Love failure.
Closing statements, gents. Go ahead. We've got 1 minute, so go for it.
So go for it. No.
Yeah, I would just pick up on Alex's point there. I think, and this works for both the vendors and for law firms themselves, build in continuous improvement. Regularly talk to, if you're a law firm, regularly talk to your vendors. They've got a lot of industry knowledge to share with you. We've built it in our processes that we'll meet with our law firms, our clients, 4 times a year. We'll make sure that we got everyone within our business involved in that process, and this is probably the key point, is put yourself in your client's shoes, ask what business problems they're trying to solve, and work back from there. And that's where we build our technology once we've heard from the marketplace that this is a problem that needs a solution to it, and that would be my advice. But yeah, minimum viable projects would be the other thing to actually get some traction, prove small pieces of success, and build from there.
Jan, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's just being close to your client at the end of the day. I think, the closer you are to your clients, the more that you're going to be able to provide them value. And I think that's really, really important. Yeah, I think it really comes down to understanding the state of the business as well. So, and that comes from being close to the client. It's a lovely little flow that goes on there. But when you're close to the client, 2 things happen. One, you understand the situation they're in, and you understand how you can help. And when you can help, you're being valuable, so you should look to do that as much as you can. And what's interesting is, a lot of the times, a client that you work with goes through stages of having difficult decisions to make and not knowing their options. If you have the ability to give them more options and to kind of give them more ways of looking at a problem, that's valuable. You should do that. A lot of the time, something beautiful comes out of it. So a good example for us is a lot of the features that we've worked on have come directly from client discussions. And that's where you see something that you think, that's great, and that's the value for us, it's the value for them, it's something that we will continue to do. And yeah, I think be close to the client.
It's a great way to end it. I know that we're out of time. One thing to keep in mind is the very end is that exercise we did at the beginning. Take away some of the conversations you had with your table, as far away as it might seem, as unrealistic as it might seem, because that's where some of these transformation ideas start, is the ideal that you would like to get to. Then there's the incremental change in getting there. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, panel.
Eric and the panel get my vote because they ran off the stage as soon as I stood up, so that was a lot easier. So you all have permission to stand up for 30 seconds, only 30 seconds. I'll tell you when you have to sit down again. My Apple Watch told me to stand up about 5 minutes ago, so I'll let you know. She's getting mic'd up. Pretty, Dan, Sean and Rory are 4 big consumers and users of legal services. They're going to talk to us about operational improvements in in-house legal. And I'm not going to pad any more. Just stand up and then sit down when they turn up on stage. Thank you.
Give us a song.
I wouldn't. This morning it was probably safe. This afternoon would just be too unpleasant. How many of you watched Car Share last night? Oh, not so many. Verdict? I was glad that they got together. Oh, and then split up again. Okay, I think we're approaching a quorum. We have a panel chair. Hello, Pretty. How are you?
Hi, Pretty. Nice
How
to
are you
meet
doing?
I was thinking, should I stand there and do it? Or should I?
Whatever you want to do. The other panelists, the other chairs have done various things. They've moved about a bit, or they've said, establish your authority by standing up and then sit down if you think it works. No, I'm going. Okay, I'll hand over to you. You just call people on or whatever you want to do.
I think there is just one more participant, Dan, and...
You've got 4 in all.
Yes, I think just one is left to be wider.
Okay, cool. All right, good luck. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Of course. Oops. I better not go to the toilet, am I? Yeah. Okay, all set. So thank you very much for making the time to be here today. My name is Preeti Shetty. I'm the General Counsel at ICICI UK PLC, which is the European banking subsidiary of ICICI Bank India.
and I'll be your host for this session. Joining me on the panel today are some really eminent speakers representing the worlds of IT, infrastructure, and legal research and publishing. Over the course of the next 40 minutes or so, we shall be focusing on what the impacts are and what the trends are that are driving operational efficiency within our in-house legal departments through the use of technology, through the use of innovation and best practices. So without further ado, I think I would like to call upon each of the panelists to give a brief introduction of their roles in their respective organizations, and then I'll jump into the meaty questions, hopefully very soon.
My name's Rory Campbell. I'm the head of editorial content at Justice Publishing. In that role, I supervise our editorial teams, which mark up case law and legislation, and I'm also responsible for our digitisation and management of income and data from suppliers.
Hi everyone, I'm Dan Kane. I'm the General Counsel for the route businesses at Network Rail. So Network Rail owns and operates the railway infrastructure, and my team support those good people out there who are doing all that hard work, operating and maintaining it. So we support the route businesses out there. There's about 15 in my team who help them through all of their legal issues that they have day to day. So thanks for having me.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean Thomas, and I'm responsible for the UK and I legal team at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. We've got a team of lawyers who are very focused on customer experience in a technology company, so huge drivers and in-house legal function on the use of technology and how we present that to our customers. And we're talking about that in a bit more detail today.
So thank you for that introduction. I'll start with Rory. Can you share tangible examples of an innovative technology, product, or process that have made a material difference in your business and in your legal department?
Yes, certainly. A lot of the content we look at is from multiple jurisdictions, so it is objectively of the same standard in terms of the judgments and legislation that we look at, but the output that we require from each set varies by jurisdiction, depending on the outcomes that our customers would use. A big problem has been the classification of that content in a way that our end users would be familiar with, but also allows us to manage the data. So what we have created is a classification piece of software in accordance with, or in work with an external expert, and we've also created the legal taxonomy around that. That work kind of took around 2 to 3 years. It was a huge exercise. We created a taxonomy with about 2.3 million nodes, which is a phenomenal amount of content to kind of create as well as manage. And at the minute, all our case law legislation is classified through this, through that classification software. It's not entirely automated. It's not entirely manually driven, but it's a marriage of the two. And it's allowed us to kind of classify content in a way that we didn't really expect previously. And that has really been a very fulfilling exercise that we've done.
So Dan, I'd like you to share your views as well around this.
Yeah, I think we probably have the same problems that most in-house functions have, which is you need to do more for less these days. And so it's probably a classic phrase that people use, but it's classic for a reason. And one of the challenges we have is around managing our external panel of law firms and ensuring that we're getting the best value for money. So again, I think anyone in-house will appreciate that challenge that the in-house community faces. And we've had a panel of firms, and we've had to try and understand how those firms are spreading the activity of work, how we're getting billed for it, how much we're paying for it, and we demonstrate ultimately to our business that they're getting value for money. We're a public sector organisation, and value for money is absolutely pivotal to what we do. And I don't think for a long time we've been able to do that genuinely. I think it surprised me that the firm's data isn't that good. I perhaps was expecting more when I started looking into the problem. And it's an area, if we're looking about improvement across the board, I think law firms could improve there in terms of data. We are ourselves not in a great position to criticise because our data was equally poor. But what we did was we found a solution, and through a small organisation, a small tech startup called Effiiciency. I don't know if people are familiar with the name, but what they have managed to do for us is bring together all of that data to allow us to be far more transparent with our own business about the spend externally and allow us to see trends cross-panel, something that we'd not been able to do before. We started just manually bringing different bits together, and you'll find if you could do it 5 times, you'll get 5 different numbers, frankly, as to what you're pulling together. So now we get one, and we think it's right.
Very good. Sean, I'm assuming at Hewlett-Packard with a team of how many, 500 lawyers worldwide, there must be some very tangible examples that you could share with us. Any memorable one that stands out for you?
Sure, absolutely. I mean that was a really good point around data. As a technology company, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise is, obviously very well placed to have a legal function that focuses on technology and data. Our overall general counsel in San Francisco, he's obsessed with data. It all comes down to what are the underlying metrics, what data supports it, how do you prove your value to the customer, how do you prove value to the business, how do you justify headcount, how do you show technology is having a material positive impact on your outcome. It's all about outcomes for our customers and our internal clients. So data really underpins that, and what enables that is technology. And we utilize a number of across the legal department across the globe. We use a number of different technologies. A number of them are homegrown, but some obvious ones that are third-party providers are SFDC, Aptis, Team Time, and those are all driven at enabling Salesforce to come through and request legal support and then document that and then apply, well, X hours per X transaction for X value. That's the business justification using data technology to enable an in-house legal function. So, a lot of what we focus on as an in-house function in the technology space is how do we really get those data sets that really emphasize what we're doing, the value we're adding, operational efficiencies. So much focus on that because it comes back to doing less for more. The game breakers for us at the moment as a technology supplier in the technology market, it's about speed to contract and customer experience enabled by technology. So for us, it's smart contracting. We talk about our competitors, AWS, Apple, IBM. These guys all have immensely effective e-commerce smart contracting. So we looked at external providers, and we've come to the conclusion that there isn't anything out there that we think is good enough for what we want. Therefore, us, we're making ourselves. So we can talk about how you might do that as an in-house legal team down the road, but it's about putting in place an electronic contracting portal that gives our customers the best legal contracting experience. And that's been kind of a real game changer for us.
Very good. I just wanted to interrupt to say if there are any questions that you want to ask, please feel free to do it in the course of this rather than wait at the end of the session. So just feel free to ask any questions at any point of time as we go along. I do realize, Dan, Sean, and Rory, you come from organizations of differing size and age. Do you believe that the size or age of your organization makes a difference in the mindset in adopting technology and embracing innovation, or do you find a resistance? I'll welcome thoughts from Sean first and then go down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as a technology company, obviously we encourage innovation, growth, new ideas, and obviously using technology. There's still the lawyer's in-house mindset, which is this going to prejudice my job down the road? And I think we view it very much as technology as complementary to legal skill sets, and also it's an enabler. And furthermore, if you use the operational side and the data side, you can actually emphasize what a great job your legal team are doing. And I think at the lower level, it's enabled us to take a large portion of work either offshore or using different forms of technology, which means that the more junior lawyers or mid-level lawyers get a better quality of work from day one. So actually, it's quite attractive to new joiners to our team to say, you don't have to do NDAs, you don't have to do SOWs, you don't have to do these type of contracts because that's been dealt with separately. And actually, we can throw you into the high-impact, value-add, big negotiations with top-end customers that have the impact on our business model. So I think if you sell the mentality right internally and you embrace change, which is what we have to do in the context of an in-house legal function using technology, you can get across that.
Dan, your views?
Yeah, so I'll give you a classic lawyer's response. It depends, frankly. So it depends who you ask.
You're sitting on
in
the
an organisation of 40,000 people, you go out into the operational world in the railway and you ask a signaller who's pulled signal levers for 40 years, man and boy, and whose father and grandfather did it, men and boys, then the idea of saying we're going to come into a digital railway world where all the signalling is going to be done digitally, you'll find there'll be quite a lot of opposition to that all of a sudden they're going to be looking at a computer screen going forward to signal trains. However, moving to the more of the corporate environment that we're in within the head office, and you ask the lawyers about how susceptible they are to change, will they embrace it or not, you'll get a really mixed response there. Some of them have got an absolutely open mindset to this and recognise that if you are putting in place procedures, processes that will improve our service delivery, it will improve their own quality of lives at work. And we've placed a real emphasis within the team on saying you need to be coming to work and enjoying what you do because you give your best when you enjoy what you do. And how can we make that as easy as possible for you whilst delivering a great service to our internal customers or our clients? And part of that is by using whatever tools we have to give people that opportunity to think in a very open mindset, to say what's in it for them. And that's how change can be delivered, not just through technology, but generally what's in it for them. So if I've got someone in my team who's really opposed to it, and I'll give you a great example. Time recording in-house. I mean, it's probably the worst idea anyone who leads a team in-house could do is say to the team, don't worry guys, we're going to start time recording, okay? Now, I made that error early on, but in truth I did it in a slightly different way. And we said to people, we're going to use basic tools, Excel, you know, let's get lawyers using Excel first before we start getting AI. I mean, it would be great if we can get Excel, Microsoft, and even sometimes open the door. So we need to get people doing simple stuff first, and time recording for me was really important. We didn't call it time recording because that would have lost me my job, but we used some of the form terminology, business activity tracking, and people, oh, that sounds brilliant, they will do that. And what we did was we say, actually, look, tell your customers what is it you're doing, why you're doing it, so we can understand if you're focusing on their priorities, okay? So all of a sudden they realised that this wasn't about recording 6-minute units, about whether I was making a cup of tea, could I charge for it, or am I sitting on the toilet, can I charge for it? This is genuinely, are we going to be doing something that adds value to our business and our customer that doesn't need to be measured in every 5 minutes, whatever it is. What are you doing that half day? What are you doing that for an hour? Try and bring it together and tell our business what they're spending their money on. And now that's a change that we got there because we moved away from the kind of traditional language and we said, what's in it for you? So technology, yes, we used Excel to get there, but reality, this is about driving change through the team.
From my experience, our company is probably a lot smaller than you guys, but they pick up on two salient points that you both made. The first thing is technology has delivered a real gain for us in terms of time saved for our editors, but also our development teams that we work alongside. So the benefit of having a smaller company is obviously you can be slightly more, and I use the phrase deliberately agile in terms of a development team structure, but also working with the end users who would benefit from that. Our editors are based, obviously, have come from a legal background and would be the end users that our customers are likely to be from as well. So we've sped up the rate that we annotate things using technology. We've got various tagging tools that we use now. We've got various XML tagging structures in place that allow our lawyers to spend much more focused time on the kind of value that we can derive from judgments and legislation rather than simple data entry. And they kind of re-emphasise that as well, both in purely a staff retention. It's a much easier sell to somebody with 2 or 3 years post-qualification experience if you can say to them, look, you're coming in to work on valuable content, you're not just going to be a data entry clerk, because that's a much harder sell. So no matter how good the salary is, if they feel that they're coming in to just tag data rather than analyse and derive value from a particular document that they know their fellow colleagues would use. So that's been a big thing. I think the paths will be fairly similar in that there is always resistance internally to change, but I think also it depends slightly on a generational thing. I think that people are approaching it with a lot wider mind or more open mind with these things because they're more familiar with the sort of technologies as they've studied. And I think over time we should see, hopefully both in the public sector, bigger organisations and smaller companies, a greater uniformity of purpose in that sense.
So that really, I think flowing from that, I wanted to really ask you, all the panelists, do you think the legal sector as a whole has been slow on the uptake with regard to innovation and technology as compared to the other professional services? Dan, drawing on your example about us, first getting our basics right before talking about AI and big data and all the rest of it.
I mean, there's loads to talk about it. We know that we come to conferences like this, and in some respects, you're looking for that golden nugget, aren't you? That's going to say, this is going to change the way that I deliver my service to my customers or clients. I call them customers. It just feels to me like we're providing a service. But at the moment, that golden nugget just seems a little bit far away over the other side of the rainbow, frankly. There's loads of talk about it, and I think there's a real appetite for people to get it right. And I'm not going to be surprising anyone here when I say I think at the moment we are waiting to see, and I'm not overly optimistic that I'm going to see a revolution in the way that the legal service is delivered through technology at the moment. I think if we take a more sensible, incremental approach, we can make a really big difference in how legal service is delivered. But I have to make a distinction here between in-house legal services and externally provided legal services, because I think as an in-house team of 30 or so lawyers, we don't have the capacity to start understanding that marketplace and driving through change in an organisation of 40,000 people where the lawyers want a product that all of a sudden is going to work for them. The change really for us will come in how our external legal providers drive that forward. And that agenda at the moment, I think, has been really slow in the take-up. I know that we've got innovation teams, we've got directors of knowledge, we've got directors of change, all of these grandiose titles with really important jobs behind them. The real challenge for me in the law firms is, what's their incentive to change? Okay, what is it that's going to make a law firm with its partnership move away from delivering a service based on hourly billing model to one where it provides genuine value for money on a transparent basis where I know what I'm getting? And I think that the more simple the solution to that, the happier customers like me will be. But there's a but for that, and it's this, that I think the only ones who have the power to make that happen are people like ourselves here. What matters to law firms is making sure that their profit margins remain as they are. And, that's life, that's a business, and I completely support that. But if there is nothing there to disrupt that, and if no one who is ultimately funding them is demanding something very different, then I agree with the law firms at the moment. Don't start taking on technology that's going to try and improve your service to us, because frankly we're not demanding it sufficiently. Keep doing what you're doing and making lots of money out of it until people like us sitting here make that demand. It's not going to change.
Sean, do you agree with that, or you?
Yeah, I mean, I think two points that I would flag on that, around law firms, and in the Hewlett Enterprise Legal Department, obviously we engage a lot of major law firms, and one of our key criteria for law firms is, what is your technology value add? What are you going to bring to a technology company in the provision of legal services that is going to have a material impact on us from a technology standpoint? And if you don't meet that, we're not going to give you any business. And that's kind of, over and above relationships. So that's really important. So talk about, in-house legal teams having responsibility to drive change. I think, as you say, a lot of it sits with, the general counsel or his team. I think the second point that law firms need to appreciate is that a lot of suppliers can come directly to sophisticated in-house legal teams. They don't have to go via law firms, right? So law firms have to appreciate that and say, well, how do I, what is my value add again? What am I doing by taking a supplier solution, plugging it into a private practice model, and then selling it on to the in-house legal team at Hewlett Packard Enterprise? So law firms have to think about that, because we've had a lot of suppliers come directly to us and sell us their solutions, and well, that's obvious. So how do law firms add value to that? And I asked the head of technology at Freshfields a couple of months ago, and they said, oh, we're going to become a technology company. That was the Freshfields response. So law firms appreciate that is a risk for them, and they're thinking, well, why would these tools go directly? Why won't these tools go directly to end customers and go via law firms? So I think, again, an additional pressure on law firms to really embrace technology and move away from some of the legacy models. But I also would say that, The key thing for in-house legal teams in onboarding technology, and I'm not saying this from a purely kind of technology company focus point, is how do you go about doing it? It is incremental, it has to be, but you also have to take steps which you wouldn't normally do as a legal function. And that includes building an operations team. We've got a 12-person legal operations team around the world who really focus on technology. They're part techie, part legal, part ops, and they are focused on different technologies, external and internal, legal department operations, and legal department requirements. And they have been absolutely central to our ability to, one, onboard and increment the amount of technology we use as a legal function. So I think there's the first step for any in-house legal team working with a law firm or with an external provider is how do you go about that onboarding process? Because without doing that, you're setting yourself up to fail. If lawyers try and use technology directly, it's a much bigger challenge. And I think that's some of the, speaking to colleagues, another major in-house legal teams, that is a major challenge that they face. And it's not fit for purpose, it doesn't work the way they want it to work, it doesn't deliver the outcome they're looking for, it doesn't give them certainty of solution, and a lot of that has to do with following correct pilots and a correct onboarding process. So I think that's important for both law firms and external providers to realize when they are working with in-house legal teams about really encouraging the implementation of technology.
And I would expect, Sean, there, sorry to interrupt, that the external law firm would provide that support, because you've got 500 lawyers in your team, so 12 operations people seems a reasonable thing to do. We've got 30 lawyers, we don't have operations people, I don't have a budget to get operations people, and on the one hand, should I do that? On the other hand, all the lawyers sitting there working themselves silly are saying, you're bringing an operations person, and yet I've got tons of work to do. So that's a real challenge that we've got to get by.
Sure.
And who's going to fill that gap? Because I agree, that implementation phase is absolutely critical. Get that wrong, the whole thing does fail. Yeah. I don't have the skill set, my team don't have the skill set, so we need someone with that ability to act as that intermediary. And at the moment, I don't know where that comes from.
Rory, do you face the same kind of challenges?
Yeah, I mean, certainly in terms of how we differentiate ourselves from other publishers at the minute is technology. And that has been a big, big change, particularly since 1999, the growth of BLI, OSLI, CanLI, and the free legal services, legislation.gov. Publishers previously used to differentiate themselves on what content that you had. Did you have exclusive content, certain sets of case reports, or certain annotated legislation or consolidated legislation? That's changed, and anybody can just pick up a tablet or a phone and find a piece of legislation. It's what you do around that and what else you can do with it. And now we are starting to have to differentiate ourselves on technology, which means also moving in a field that we perhaps weren't as experienced as we would like to be, and very much that kind of bridging period of if you reach too far too soon, you burn the idea as a concept for your customers, but also internally for the people who will use the technology. So we've had to move slowly in some aspects and quite quickly in others, and that has been a market-led thing. And I think with the in-house firms, in-house departments, that's where the pressure will come from external firms. They don't necessarily want external firms to be a one-stop shop. What they want them to do is what they currently do in big value deals, to continue doing that. And as you both have read, you can almost bypass certain firms, and the technology firms can approach in-house departments directly. So I guess my experience would be consistent with Sean and Dan.
So Rory, I would ask you my next question. How would you actually measure the value of innovation when you decide to bring something new, innovative, or bring a new technology into your department? What is the main criteria which is going on in your head? Is it about making a change to the bottom line? Is it about the intangible benefits that will go to the other parts of the organization? Because would it facilitate ease of business for the non-lawyers, so to speak, in your organization?
I guess there would be two aspects. That there would be the long-term research and development and technology, things that you will not derive a tangible benefit from in the immediate, and in the immediate I mean the 6 months to the 12-month period. And then you've got much more kind of shorter, so our development team, technology team work in short bursts or sprints. And it's very much, rather than try and fix one big project, they tackle things in small bite-sized. And it will be very much commercially driven of, right, what will make a tangible benefit in terms of both our users, internally and externally. Now, looked at a whole, each of those elements add up to a greater total. So you've got that kind of being able to digest change in terms of the technology. both in terms of the data that we process is generally consistent. The uses that people make of it are slightly different, but our measurement isn't always commercially based. It isn't right, we are going to make X amount of money or profit from this. It can sometimes be a purely internal time-saving device, which of course there is a commercial benefit to. But it's also, we've worked with various courts and tribunals in that and provided bureau services for them, which has been a big thing. And even though there may not be a direct immediate commercial benefit from that, it's in terms of relationships going forward. So there isn't a single metric that we use for that. It really depends on the content and the certain part of technology that we would be looking at that time.
Dan?
Yeah, I mean, the value, it's the million-dollar question, is how do you demonstrate value really by doing this? I mean, it's both the bottom line and it's also then the intangible bits. So if I take what we do as a function, we talk to our key customers, we have account meetings with them every quarter, so we get to know what their expectations are. And our tagline is that we're going to consistently exceed customer expectations. So the first thing you need to do is understand what your customers' expectations are. And then you can kind of understand, well, how is it that we're going to deliver on those expectations with this amount of people, this kind of budget? Are we going to be able to meet and exceed your expectations? And through those conversations, we can understand what kind of changes we can make, through tech or otherwise, to deliver a better service to them, because that's ultimately what we're there for. And I think actually the bottom line comes from providing a service that is faster, better, smarter. And the bottom line will follow. So once you can start to remove bottlenecks in processes, once you can start to understand truly what it is your customer perceives to be value, then you can deliver against that benchmark. What we did, funnily enough, we went out and talked to it's the finance directors of the 8 different business units that I look after, and said to them all, what is it that you really want from us? Ultimately, here's a list of things that you might want from your lawyer. Is it quality? Is it price? Is it that we're always there for you? Is it that you want us to be human beings first and then lawyers second? Whatever it might be. And without fail, they all said the quality of advice came ahead of the cost. Okay, so we knew then, all right, we're not going to spend a fortune on it, but we know that the quality of advice is absolutely your priority. So what am I going to do then to change what we do to ensure you're getting that quality? And so if I can give them that quality and we can find a way of measuring that quality, because it's all data-driven, we've said it already, metrics to me are now providing the absolute empirical evidence to demonstrate how we're delivering against our particular indicators. If I can get them the quality they need, show them against their benchmark where they are, where we're trying to get to, and the steps that we're taking to get there, I can show them value based on genuine data.
Sean?
I think our focus point is very much our customer experience. We talked about internal clients or your business units. I think that's obviously a key focus point for us. But our end game would be very much our customer experience. How do we enhance the customer's experience when they purchase technology and infrastructure from HP? And obviously the contracting cycle, one example, is key in that sale process. So for us, it would be outcomes based in terms of what is the benefit for the customer: speed, investment, cost, and experience. And those are, we've seen very obvious, tangible benefits on all fronts there when you embrace technology and use it and you try to implement it in the right way. So I think that's an obvious point for kind of a technology supplier providing product, services, software support to customers. The other area I think is really important is comes back to data about the operational efficiencies, and having that data source and that data pool to illustrate that and to say, deals of $10 million cost 10 hours of lawyer time can be closed in 5 hours. We have all the data points for that, and we can do that by using this process and procedure, this technology, this man time, and again, the combination of those outcomes-based customer experience versus underlying operational data, it's a very compelling story in terms of tangible benefits from using technology.
Good. Any questions at this point?
Just got an observation on the discussion that was there about the having the resources to do some of these things, having to rely on law firms. I mean, there is the corporate legal operations competencies organisation, which is trying to share best practice, and you've got small, medium, large here, and it's the large has got the resources to put into these teams to look at this, and isn't the answer to your problem to share those competencies across organisations in the corporate world and then come out into the legal service providers and say, look, here's the standard process, here's the standard procedures. Are you going to comply?
John, Dan, would you like to take this question?
The answer is yes. There you go. I think, I think we do have to share best practice. Is there an appetite to do it across the board? Am I going to learn anything? I mean, some of the things you're talking about, Sean, in terms of your internal ways of recording time spent from delivery of performance of contract, it'd be great. And I'd love to be able to get that understanding of how you deliver it, but I'm sure there's going to be something you want in return. Maybe not now, because we've obviously become friends. So, but I think going round, there's always this tit for tat somewhere else. Now, if we can share that best practice, that we've got something to offer back, which probably we have, then yeah, absolutely, I agree.
Yeah. Well, we would embrace it. We would embrace it. Open source model. We're a big player in the open source space. Absolutely. And I think the challenge would be is that a lot of what we do is very bespoke and linked to our business model and our client base and the way we operate. But I think there's some high-level strategy, process, and procedures which absolutely large, small, medium corporate and onboarding X technology could implement. So I think it's a very good idea. It's just a question of how it would happen.
Where we do need to do it, certainly, I mean, I completely agree with the concept. Where we do need to do it is with the external firms, because as I said earlier on when we were talking about that particular question, it's us that can drive the value with the legal service providers. That's where a joined-up approach would work.
From my perspective, from the small, absolutely. It wouldn't even need to be on a quid pro quo basis because we would drive benefit from it. But I think there is the general will to do that. It's often the key decision makers in bigger firms, our partners who perhaps aren't necessarily as joined up with that sort of thinking. I think a number are, but obviously we need probably a bit more kind of push, from want of a better word, from that field.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question. Given that a lot of the innovation that you're considering implementing uses technology, how well addressed do you feel you are by the technology providers in the sector? Certainly, historically, in-house, which is a dreadful phrase in itself, isn't it? The buyers of external provided legal services or the internal providers seems to have been a bit of an afterthought, really, for legal technology vendors. Is that changing? Do you feel well addressed?
Sean, would you like to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've piloted all technology with major suppliers and direct, not via law firms. And I think we always feel that if you part of the issue comes from in-house legal teams embracing technology. And if you have a genuine mindset that you want to embrace technology and go out there and try things, we've piloted 10 different technologies in the last 12 months. We felt that the suppliers were, the technology suppliers were very keen to embrace that opportunity. I don't think we felt the same with our interactions with law firms in terms of their embracing of technology. So I think, but I do think there's a responsibility on the in-house legal team to take that step forward and engage with external technology suppliers, because technology suppliers probably target specific customers, whether that's corporates or whether that's law firms. But I think the majority of companies out there will find that unless they actually proactively seek it out, it's not going to come to them on a plate.
Yeah. The only thing I'd add to that, and we've dabbled, I think is probably the best I can say. I don't feel that the products that we are looking at necessarily feel sufficiently in-housey. To take your phrase that you hate even further to an even further awful phrase, but being in-housey, I think there is an element of bespokeness about what we need, and configuring the systems to be we're so varied in the way we deliver work, and I don't think private practice has such a varied way of delivering that work. It's kind of the model we know exists. Even talking about our business activity tracker, aka time recording, be great for someone to say, here's a tool that you can just do it like that, because I still get grief for it not being as simple as it could be. But I don't think people really feel that that's a tool that's necessarily going to be something useful to in-house. They're generally, I agree, prepared for the private practice market. And they'll probably hear people today say, no, our product will do this for you. And we saw a demonstration of one that certainly would. Afterthought is probably right, though. And to some extent, I don't disagree with that, because we are a very, certainly for the vast majority, there are bigger customers like yourselves, but we are a smaller market.
In terms of being a provider of that technology, I guess our experience has been over the past 5 years, there's been a move from individuals within in-house departments and private practice from approaching us for quotes on that technology. I wouldn't say it's a sea change, but definitely there's been a greater move as an institution to people wanting and being much more kind of receptive to certain ideas, and at the same time being more focal about what they need, whether it is a bespoke solution. Having worked in an in-house legal department, there was no point us being offered a one-stop shop for every topic. It was employment law and property law. Anything beyond that wouldn't have been any use to us. So I think as an industry, with both in-house and private sector firms being more focal but also having greater knowledge about what they could benefit from, that has definitely been of benefit to everybody.
Thank you. So other than technology, do you think there are any other practices that you believe are equally helpful in driving change and improving your processes? And if you could give an example of any that you have adopted and would like to talk about. So Sean, can I start with you?
Other than technology?
Yes, other than technology.
I mean, I think, you know, from an operational standpoint, not emphasizing technology, HPE's focus is fundamentally on people and culture. In terms of driving successful legal departments, you can introduce as much technology and you know, process and procedures as you can. But if you get the cultural people standpoint right, you know, that's going to underpin underpin your whole business model. So our CEO's focus is, you know, his 3 core values are customers first, obviously, innovation, and culture, and you know, the emphasis on culture and people that really underpin a successful in-house legal team are really at the heart of what we do. So when you combine successful hiring people and cultural management alongside use of technology and, you know, strict operational discipline, you know, it seems to kind of give a positive outcome in terms of results for the business.
Very good, Dan.
Yeah, I agree. Creating the right environment for people to be able to change in a positive way is so important. So if we look at some of the stuff that we've been doing that's not technology specific, I think giving people the empowering people to be able to make change for themselves is really important. So most of the change, particularly if you follow this incremental, so this structured continuous improvement philosophy that I very much believe in is the right way to go. Those changes are changes that happen at the coalface, if you like. So they're from people doing that job day in, day out. They are the ones who know where those small changes will make a real difference to their product and their delivery. So we started this idea of having 100 changes in 100 days. I've always been quite taken by the Sir David Brailsford model in cycling. I don't know whether or not people are familiar with that. Perhaps cycling isn't a great example at the moment. But certainly British cycling came from kind of nowhere, from zero to hero really, and became the #1 in the world cycling team through the successes of this kind of structured continuous improvement. They looked at everything they did and they asked the question, why is it we're doing it that way? Why don't we try doing it differently? And that might be from the extent of changing the seat slightly, or streamlining some of the equipment, taking your own pillow with you when you're on tour so it gives you less chance of getting a bad neck. Really small marginal gains. So I thought, let's try and adopt that philosophy in-house in a legal team who have no interest probably in cycling or of marginal gains. And it was a failure. No, it wasn't. It was a success. So it really worked. So we said, look, let's look at some things that really annoy you, okay, in your day. What is it that really gets on your nerves when you come into work every day and you accept it? And let's be honest, people have this at home in their own lives as well. Something that really annoys you, you just don't do something about it because it's in the too difficult box or you can't be bothered. And everyone in the team came up with half a dozen up to 10 items that they really wanted to change, really small things. And we said, OK, well, let's commit as a team. We've got 100 of them now. Let's make those 100 changes in 100 days, set the target and deliver against it. And hey, presto, we delivered against it in about 80 days or so, simply because we had a focus on something that we knew was a benefit to us all in the team. And you know what? It was little stupid changes, but they make a real difference.
Very good. Rory?
Really, just to continue with that theme, it's the small changes that often deliver the kind of most, I wouldn't say beneficial in terms of like huge scale things, but recently what we did is we had a hackathon day where we took all the employees in the company, had a straw poll for what was their bugbear, what was the one thing that most annoyed them, pardon my French, and it was one of these things that there was a lot of people who said, well, that's always been like that, I've just accepted it. But when we realised actually little things that kind of both customers and ourselves were experiencing, and it might only cost you a couple of seconds here and there. And it was just a really nice way of kind of putting the technology side element to one side, of kind of having a straw poll, getting a feel for where we could make those sort of gains. And I think it was just a really good experience as bringing the company together in terms of both the lawyers, developers, the sales team, the marketing team, and having that kind of benefit of that bigger pool of knowledge rather than the lawyers just saying, right, this is what we want or this is what we believe our customers would want. Having that kind of more commercial aspect in there as well, but only purely for internal purposes. So that's probably a big change.
So let me ask you a controversial question. There is, of course, a huge explosion of legal technology and technological innovations and all the words around artificial intelligence and big data. How much of this do you think is hype and how much of this do you think is reality? And how do you differentiate it? So, Sean, I'm going to ask you because you're the tech expert.
Well, I think you're interesting question. There are a lot of really good technologies out there. Finding one that is fit for purpose for what you want is less obvious. HP used to own a number of the major eDiscovery and Raven and various other things through acquisitions, and so we've seen a lot of the technology, and I think the most important thing when you're looking at AI or robotics or blockchain or whatever you think could be useful for your business is really understanding what you need and what is the capability of the technology. And I think where we've seen colleagues and other legal departments and actually ourselves when piloting these things is not finding a fit for purpose technology and also understanding how the technology works, what it can do for you, and the discipline it takes to make it work. A lot of these technologies come from how you actually use them, how much time you invest in them, how you train them, what team do you have on the ground running them. And it's not just in most cases, for the really successful ones, it's not a plug in and play. And I think, so our perspective is that there's some great technology out there. We have not been convinced that it's fit for purpose for what the HP legal department is doing at the moment. Therefore, we're creating our own technology and building our own, building our own contracting platform. But we do use other technologies for Salesforce.com, for Aptus, for contract management, for team time. And we've looked at all the other kind of document management, document review, e-discovery, etc. So I think there's a lot of excitement about it. I recently was at a seminar where they were talking about blockchain, and they talked about the US government procurement cycle, which I think ran at 114 days on average. And this is it's the second largest US government department. They introduced blockchain into one procurement cycle that went down to 12 days. So you can see that in certain scenarios, the right type of technology can completely revolutionize your business model or your legal requirements. But equally, I think you need to look at everything very closely, really understand what you need, what capability you're looking for,
sure.
And work very carefully either with a supplier or internally to make that happen, because there are still a lot of things which are there's a lot of hype about, but don't quite meet the standard from my perspective anyway.
A very comprehensive answer from the tech expert. Rory, can I bring you into this?
Yeah, in terms of big data, we've moved very much from a relationship database structure to much more of a graph where everything is an entity, and this is kind of following a trend that's happening in the US, particularly with private sector litigation, where people are looking now at the concept of machine learning algorithms, big data, all these kind of catchwords in terms of creating a world of known variables and being able to predict on the basis of that. There's a huge amount of work still to do on that, but it is a very topical thing, what we're doing. And again, because the majority of our competitors and ourselves have fairly uniform sets of data, it's again how you differentiate yourself and how you use that data or extract value from that data. I was slightly skeptical with the predictive algorithms, that model in terms of doing it, but having looked at a fairly big data set, there is, I think, real future in that, and that's purely for litigation, so you could extrapolate from that process into much other, again, not necessarily litigation, it would be arbitration, anything like that, anything where you have known elements in there. So I think there's a huge amount still to do and a huge amount of benefit that probably has been untapped yet. So I think there's definitely, even though it's a cliche, I think there is definite value in there.
Very good. Dan, would you like to have the last word in it? And I think I'm getting the evil eye now on time. The tech guy.
I will keep it brief then. I just love the idea of not being sure about the products out there, so building your own. I think that's brilliant. We just couldn't do that. I don't know. I'm not qualified enough to know whether or not all that's on out there that people are talking to me about is going to deliver the solutions I need. My head hurts with the amount of stuff that's out there telling me that they can improve my business. And I'm sure it can. Technology-wise, I'm sure it can. But behind all of that has got to be the right mindset. And there's got to be the understanding of what can it do for my business to help my customers deliver ultimately for the end users. And at the moment, I don't have that confidence and assurance that anything we invest in right now is going to be felt at the end of the process. I'm sure it can, but there's something in the middle that's missing between output and input, and frankly, I am not the person to be that one in the middle.
Do we have time for questions, or?
No.
No. Okay. Any quick questions from the audience?
Oh, subversion.
Yes. All right, then I'd just like to thank the panelists for the very valuable insights and a really thought-provoking discussion today. Thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Pretty, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So, because I know Stephen Allen personally, I can tell him that he is going to be finished with his panel at 18:28 without fail. There will be a power cut at 18:31. I need 2 minutes to close. So, Stephen, you are closing this session with your panel. You're going to talk about...
Introduce me into something that involves swear words. So it's nice for such a polite introduction. I'm going to let the other panelists introduce themselves. But just before I do, I've got some questions for the audience. How many people have we got from law firms here, just so we know? How many people from in-house? How many people from the Big Four? Have we got anybody from the Big Four? Okay, we'll be careful. Have we got anyone called Alex Hamilton? No, is he left already? Great, love Alex. So just while the others are going to come up and introduce themselves, before they do, I have to tell you that one of the panellists has been on Interpol's Most Wanted list. So there's going to be a prize at the end donated by one of the vendors. We've not asked them yet. If you can guess which member of the panel has been on the...
Well done, everybody. Thank you.
There we go. Should have turned his mic off. So my name's Stephen Allen. I'm chairing this event. I used to be a lawyer, and then I ran a telecoms company, then I worked for the Big Four, and then I've come back to Big Law. And even though I've worked in both Big Law and for the Big Four, I know much less than any of the panellists about this subject. So I'm going to invite them to come up on stage. I think we're all mic'd up.
Okay.
I'm going to sit down as well now.
Where are you going to sit?
It's a bit like Glastonbury, isn't it? Because it's got different stages, which means we're the last on the big stage, which means we're this year's Barry Gibb, I think. So if I could just ask everybody to perhaps give a quick overview to who they are and what they do and their standpoint, that'd be interesting. I'm going to start with Rohit because he wasn't looking at me.
I'm Rohit Talwar. I'm the CEO of Fast Future. We are a publisher about the future. We also do consulting and speaking around the future. And the reason I'm here is that we spend a lot of our time with professional services firms, helping them get over the zombie orthodoxies, as Demos would call them, to go after the new opportunities in the market and give themselves permission to play where the big money is.
Okay, hi, I'm Rachel Chiara. I've got my own law firm. I've advised for the past 20 years all sorts of professional practices, and in recent times my specialised area is SRA regulation, and I've advised the new entrants into the market, and many of my clients have been the Big Four. So hopefully we'll have an interesting discussion today.
Martin Telfer, I'm the Chief Executive of the EMEA region for Fulcrum. We are bringing SAP to law firms slowly and painfully, but we are doing it. Prior to that, 25 years in legal IT as a CIO of a number of law firms, including Vincent Masons, Mallisons, Minter Ellison, and Baker McKenzie.
Cool. So we're going to start off by saying that actually I think we're asking the wrong question. The Big Four versus the Big Law question, I kind of think is irrelevant. What we should really be asking is, and we will go back to the Big Four, Big Law in this context, but really asking what do we think it is that clients will actually want tomorrow? Because I think before we can look at the comparative benefits of either or both or a third alternative, what is it that clients actually want? I'm going to throw that open to whoever fancies it. Rohit, again?
Go on, I'll start then. So a lot of the competition we see within legal at the moment is about how do we get the biggest slice of a $630 billion industry, how do we protect our bit, how do we hold off automation for as long as possible, how do we find the new ideas, and how do we hold off the Big Four coming in. But there's another way of looking at it, which says that the global economy is about $78 trillion today. That will grow to about $120 trillion over the next 7 to 10 years. And more than half of that will come from industries and businesses that have either just been born or don't yet exist. And everyone is being transformed, whatever sector you look at. New technology, new thinking, new competition is changing the way they do business and driving new legal, new financial requirements. So I'm building a new synthetic molecule. A, what are the legal ramifications of that, me taking that into products and services? And B, what does the business model look like when I'm going to be charging per use of the molecule? So there's a lot of interesting opportunities there for both sides. And we see this in every sector. So driverless cars, all the law about if you have an accident, who do you hit? What are the ethics that go into deciding the frameworks? Every sector has that going on now where they're being transformed. Companies are looking at how do they monetize their science and technology portfolio, what are the legal risks associated with some of the stuff they're investing in. We're seeing a huge wall of money going into startups in every sector, all of which need different kinds of legal advice because most of them are trying to disrupt a sector and cut across current legal barriers and current legal accounting structures. So for me, the real question is, how well do we understand how our existing clients are changing? Where are they looking to automate and take accounting or legal out of the process? And where are the new risks and opportunities that they're facing where we can generate some premium revenues? And that's the exciting bit for me, and the thing that I think gets junior staff excited is about all the new opportunities that are coming up, and how do we build models to go after them, rather than the kind of internal debate we tend to have about protecting what we have and holding off the big four.
Rachel?
Well, I think you're absolutely right in that we are driven entirely by what consumers are looking for, and there is a tension between traditional legal services providers, accounting, consultancy, tax advice, automated services, and from my discussions with GCs, in-house counsels, what people are looking for is a user-friendly service to meet all of those needs in one go. And it might be that they are seeking an integrated, automated, legal, commercial package together with some specialist elements. And we need to be prepared to address that, whether it's in big law or big four. That, to me, is where we need to start focusing our energy.
So let me paraphrase a couple of comments I heard at some more recent conferences. Businesses are not looking for lawyers. They're looking for solutions to their legal problems. I would actually take that a stage further and say they're looking for solutions to their business problems, some of which have a legal component. Right now, just about the only way you can buy that is through law firms, although at the edges it could be new law, it could be any kind of business in this country, not so in the US, but in this country you have some options. So if our clients become as fickle as consumers and they find a better way to solve those business problems, why would they not buy from them? You see the pendulum swinging rapidly at the moment towards in-house, and if you talk to in-house counsel, the argument is I hire those people because they're not motivated by billable hours, and most importantly, they understand my business. How many years have we been doing client surveys? Hundreds. They always say, be responsive, understand my business. Top two responses. And they're the two things, apparently, that law firms are still not doing. So that's what they want, not just tomorrow, but today and yesterday and 100 years ago. So that shouldn't be too hard, but apparently it is.
So I think one of the interesting things, and we discussed this on the many hours we obviously spent preparing for this conference, is actually it's not a kind of one-size-fits-all. And the Big Four have all taken a slightly different approach to how they address the market. And we all know that at the moment the US is kind of out, apart from they can dress up legal services as something else like regulatory guidance or give it some other title. But I mean, Rachel, without betraying any confidences, are you able to just give us kind of your quick take based on publicly available information of where each of the Big Four currently sit?
Yeah, I mean, I won't sort of go into where each of the Big Four sit, but there seems to be different approaches, and there's one aspect which is a sort of a head-to-head competition with big law firms, full-on corporate services integrated with financial and accounting services. The second is a sort of integrated service, so something that's very much more holistic and adds on to the traditional tax advisory work piece, that the legal element would sit alongside that and become a one deliverable to the client. And then you can have a third aspect where it's actually more part of a sort of consulting type arrangement. So it's very much driven by the ethos of each individual firm as to the approach taken.
And some of them have been just doing this for years. I mean, we talked, and this is in the public domain, so it's not portraying it, but PwC have had a law firm ever since the old multidisciplinary practice Landwell days. Why is it now, do you think, they're making more noise about it than they previously were?
I think the PwC's cases prior to prior to the full integration of PwC Legal into PwC, because now that is the regulated entity. So prior to that, they were very much separate and had to be separate in terms of the provision of their services. Whereas now the benefits of an integrated, holistic deliverable are truly available. And I think that's the powerful piece, that they can make a really big splash because they've got already a huge legal team, and obviously they've got an enormous accounting business. So actually they can really meet the market needs quite head on.
And that, I mean, one of the interesting things is they are the big four. There's 4 of them. They have enough issues with audit conflicts generally. I mean, Martin, how do you think they're going to get over that hurdle of addressing not really the legal conflicts, but the commercial conflicts that the rest of us have to live with?
I think in the same way they managed to get over the last ban on having consulting and audit services when they sold off their consulting practices, and somehow they're all doing it again now. So they find a way around these things. They're full of clever people. They'll find ways to do it. I don't think that will be a barrier, and I think we'll continue to see those regulatory barriers lower anyway. I think the real issue will be more commercial conflicts than regulation.
Well, we were talking about potential future opportunities earlier.
Well, I mean, one of the things is I think that the fear is overplayed of these big integrated practices. I speak at partner conferences for most of the big law firms every year, and one of the things they're always talking about is the difficulty they have in cross-selling within a particular practice area, be it London or Sao Paulo or wherever, but also selling across the firm. So, that's a challenge they all have, is how do we get someone who's in charge of audit also selling advisory services, risk services, the digital services, and now legal. And I don't think that's gone away. And they tend to, from what I've seen, they're still tending to do it in very specialist areas. So, a particular firm does a lot in HR advisory, expat work, all that kind of stuff, and it's been natural to put legal on the back of that. Or they're really deep into cross-border law and cross-border payments, and so they're bringing in the legal around that. I don't think many of them are trying to build fully fledged practices that mirror everything that a normal big law firm does, because they don't necessarily want all of it. They don't want the cost of building the expertise base, and they're in the middle of transforming themselves as well and looking for other opportunities in the marketplace. And the stuff that you could call dishwashing, the kind of more routine stuff that might be easier to go for, we know that over time that's going to get commoditized, more of that will get automated, more of that will get taken in-house. So if I'm a big 4 player coming into legal, I've got to be thinking, well, what am I going to do that's innovative in order to win more business away from these law firms? And that's either going to be a technology play, and if I was good at doing that, I'd be doing it in my own space anyway. Or it's going to be a really innovative service play where I'm going to come up with new solutions and, fundamentally game-changing ideas in the market that earn me, additional revenues for a period of time. And I've seen very little of that in the plays from accounting firms coming into law. It's tended to be, offering very similar services and just bringing people across from law firms to deliver it. So, to me, it doesn't feel like it's a very innovative move at the moment, but maybe some players will come forward over time who really do start to offer some innovative plays that give them some sort of advantage over the existing law firms and take away business from them.
But isn't that the point, that what you're doing is taking a business need from a client and saying, we'll service this for you. When I've seen in the past, let's take some kind of restructuring, corporate restructuring. Typically you would have had the accountants that have done some financial tax planning, and that would have gone over to the lawyers, and the lawyers would have reviewed it and come back with various legal comments on it, and it would have gone back and forward for several stages before actually you start work on it. If you have that all in-house, what the client gets on day one is a steps plan that works from a legal and a financial perspective, and then you go with everything. And it's not innovation in the sense that it's big bang technology. It's just meeting a client need in a very efficient way.
I think that's what goes into the marketing brochure and into the client pitch. That's not always what you hear from the clients afterwards about, the actual service delivery they got. And they often say that actually we had law firm A and accounting firm B who've worked together on a lot of transactions for us, and we like them working together because the people get on, they understand us well, and actually having the best of breed from both firms works better for us. So I don't think it's an automatic win for the client because they're bringing an integrated team. I think it's got to be, it's always down to the people and how well they collaborate. The other side of it is the clients are trying to take more and more of it in-house. Whenever you talk to big corporates now, they're looking for, where can we save costs where no one internally is a casualty? So, external procurement of legal, external procurement of accounting, automating a lot of the stuff that we used to do, used to be done for us by those firms. You've got the likes of Riverview Law and IBM and everyone offering us modules to plug into our core systems that do a lot of what these guys used to do. And it feels like a victimless choice when we decide to automate or bring that in-house. And so I don't think it's just a case of clients switching to a new player. I think there's a lot of innovation going on around clients trying to change, what they need, and trying to simplify the way they do certain things like M&A, and bringing new products to market or whatever. And secondly, trying to apply more innovation and more automation to a lot of processes so they can drive down the costs internally.
Mm.
So here's another way to look at that, perhaps. You don't have to be first into a market to be best at it, as exemplified by Apple, who were third or fourth into the music player market, but kind of did it more stylishly and with more process and better marketing and better packaging than the arguably functionally superior earlier MP3 players. And I kind of see the big four like that in some ways. They're coming to market, they have people, they have process, they have technology, they have relationships at the right level, and they're capable of doing pretty much the whole spectrum of work, perhaps not the very top-end niche stuff at the moment, but they're capable of doing this. And let me refer you back to another panel I was listening to. In fact, Sarah at the back there was on it in December. Elliot Portnoy was chairing it. It was 5 GCs. And I was rude enough to ask a question from the audience of the GCs. Have you used the Big Four for legal work yet? And if so, how was it? If not, are you considering it? Actually, no one had used them. There was a small sigh of relief from Elliot. But every single one said they would consider it, and 2 of them had been approached by PwC, as it happens, and they loved it. They turned up not over-lawyered, they understand my business because they do our audit, they provide lots of other advisory services. They are a perfect complement to our in-house team.
But coming back to Rohit's point earlier, unlike Apple, who have always disrupted whatever market they're in and therefore brought that disruption to the music player, we haven't really seen that with the Big Four necessarily around consulting, have we? So in a way, they're bringing disruption light rather than a fundamental disruption, because actually they're not coming from a place of having radically disrupted their own, certainly not in the consulting space anyway, their own businesses.
Right, but are we at the start of that cycle or well into it? That's an interesting question.
Yeah. And just on the Big Four, your question?
Yeah, just real quick. The Apple perspective was, I wanted to follow up on that with you really quick. With jobs gone, do you think that Apple is still disrupting, or are they... With jobs gone, do you think, Steve Jobs, is Apple still disrupting, or are they now at a point where they're making a lot of cash off of previous innovation? It's an important question because I think that's something relevant to the Big Four and a big law. You lose that innovator, what's the path forward? Again, they're still moving forward off of that, but where's that innovator within this conversation, I guess, would be my question.
I mean, this is classic Clayton Christensen, isn't it? I mean, we're just looking at, you get to a point where you disrupt, you take market share, and then you become an incumbent. I mean, Daniel and I both worked for a firm that were the disruptor in legal, I think, for very many years. And they got to a position of being big law, and whilst we both think of them fondly, they're not that disruptive influence, partly because their innovator is gone. A question I am interested in asking, and we didn't discuss this before, but it just occurred to me. when I was at the Big Four, I created a new consulting arm. And you share everything on the Big Four. It's culturally the way you do it. You share your knowledge and your insight and all of those things. And what used to commonly happen to me is I'd get a phone call from another office that says, we sold your product to a client and we used our consultants to generally have a go at delivering it. And we're in a bit of a mess now because actually we kind of don't really understand now we got into the weeds. Can you help us out? How do you think they're going to stop consultants taking stuff from the legal teams, repackaging it as kind of regulatory advisory, or something that's not a legal service, and then getting into that kind of predicament?
See, I don't actually see that as being because of the regulatory liability that sits around legal. And the procedures, policies, the compliance officer, I think it's going to be quite tightly policed by virtue of having another regulator. I can't see the same level of seepage. The solicitor badge, I think, will put a hat on
the solicitors rather than the consultants.
I can see that there's a natural fit for a lot of consultancy work. I mean, let's take say moving teams of people around the world. There is a natural crossover between immigration and employment and just general consulting work. But I think when people want legal advice, they want that delivered by a solicitor. They don't want it delivered by the consultant. They bought the package of services.
If you're going to buy a holistic service, and the service is almost, we don't really care, we want you to come and deliver this, and they say, well, actually, for less money, we can deliver you some guidance on this, which is, I think there's a real difference between a compliance program and human nature.
That's true, but there's also a significant difference in liability. So if the work, the deliverable that's gone out under the holistic package is legal service, there's a £3 million limit of the liability cap on that. Now, the rest of the service has probably got about £100,000 limit liability cap on it. So that's why I'm saying that it's going to be tightly policed.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I follow up on that? Can we just ask, of the lawyers in the room, how many of you have people on a fee-paying basis or for free inside corporate incubators or inside corporate venturing programs? Right. And that's the challenge, that a lot of the disruptive innovation is coming out of these corporate skunk works, their corporate venturing programs, their corporate incubators, their corporate investment arms. If you take the lid off those, what you'll find is people from the Big Four working in there, people from small consultancies, big consultancies, all sorts of people helping to frame the ideas. And when it comes to what does this mean from a regulatory point of view, or how do we bring this to market, our equivalent of Uber in whatever industry we're in, it's typically only at that point that someone says, well, should get some legal advice. Or the consultants or accountants are saying, well, we can do a lot of that for you and we can work out a lot of the compliance stuff for you, because that's just looking at the jurisdictional requirements in all the markets you want to go to, and which regulator would this fall under, because it looks like it could fall under two streams. And I think law gets involved very late, and that's one of the opportunities, I think, for the legal sector, is to start getting involved in corporate incubators, corporate innovation farms, corporate investment arms very early, so you're part not just of the legal decision making, but you're part of the business strategy, where you're saying, what is the smartest way of bringing this product to market that's going to cause you least hassle later on down the line? And that's where the lawyers have the advantage of being able to find the case law and cite all the, the challenges that, for example, Uber has had all around the world, or any other product you want to take that's changed an industry. And that's where I think the real opportunity is. And again, that's where, you're talking about a $78 trillion global economy that's growing because of all the new sectors. That's where the riches are. The stuff that we argue about a lot and fight over tends to be, a share of a shrinking overall legal services market.
We talked about this, the Remus and Levy study earlier, where, we seem to be, and there's, I'm not sure if Richard's still here, but Richard writes a lot about automated document reviews. It's 4% of the global legal spend, doc reviews. So even if we're 50 times more efficient. We're saving our clients 2% of their overall legal spend. And yet that seems to be something that everybody's piling into and talking about, and it's not really addressing it. I want to kind of come back to the kind of relative merits of the two, but we talked a bit about what the big four are and whatever. Turning to big law, I mean, I'll start with Martin this time. What's your understanding of big law, how we define it? I think, we kind of, it's a bit like an elephant. We know what it is when we see it, but how would you define it?
So I think you could take a number of metrics there, is countries covered, fee earners, revenue. It would never be profitability, but it would be those big indicators of size.
They still all seem to be driving nice cars.
I'm not saying they're not profitable. I'm saying they don't reveal it or measure it. I agree. So, I don't know where you draw that line. There's a AmLaw 100, there's a AmLaw 200, there's a magic circle, there's a top 100. There's all sorts of measures. I'm not quite sure where you would draw that line for big law. But you're right, it's something we all discuss and talk about comfortably and haven't clearly defined. Maybe they haven't either.
Well, I think that's the point. They probably haven't either. Right. I mean, I think wherever you are with big law now, actually, looking at the future of legal services, what is the requirement of big law? What can a law firm deliver that nothing else can deliver? And that's really where big law is. And I think it's having the knowledge and specialisation to deliver on a large scale, very complex issues. That's big law to me.
And does that cover global?
It can be global projects, it can be sector specialist, it could be legal specialisation, whatever it is, but it's the ability to go in and deal with something very complex very quickly.
So it's a capability in your mind?
Yeah, in my mind, yeah.
I think from a client perspective, it's the firms that big global corporations go to with a view to not necessarily who's got the best legal experts, but who is it that's most capable of understanding me and navigating me through whatever I need to get through when it comes up, and not worrying about whether that falls into HR law or tax law, but who will just solve my problems everywhere for me all around the world, and not keep coming back and telling me what the problem is, but telling me how they're going to help me resolve it.
Well, is anyone in the audience? Alex? What's big law?
It's the wrong side of the debate between new law and big law, or big four.
Yeah.
Big law is big law is places with timesheets.
Okay. Quite a lot of small law still doing that.
That's polite, and I thought it would be, actually.
To that point, I mean, about every 6 to 8 weeks, I meet somebody who's running the transformation project for one of the big four, and they tell me about three things. One is they say that they think that one of the other three will fail in the next 5 years. That's what they all say. The second is they all admit to really experimenting with what their strategy is. And the third is they're all really worried about these new entities they see being set up by disillusioned partners from big law, from big accounting, from big consulting, who are backing out and trying to come up with a new integrated model of delivering all this stuff. And they've got mates in the city who are willing to pump them 20 million to get it going. And they've got any number of bright young thing lawyers, accountants and consultants willing to join them who want to work on doing really interesting stuff for clients where there's a boundaryless operation between all those things. And they all know about them because there's at least one being started by someone from every one of those firms.
What do you think big law is, Stephen?
I personally think it's the global elite. So it's the big, 1.5 to 2.5 billion dollar turnover firms.
Size.
Yeah, and coverage. I think otherwise it's not big, and we misuse, and we all read bloggers who misuse the word big data all the time, and it's not really big data. I think to be big, it's got to be big. The big four are big.
It's worth putting out that even the biggest of big law isn't very big.
I was going to come to that point, but you're right, Daniel. Yeah.
1% of the legal market.
Yeah, well, it's not only that, but the other interesting thing is if you add the global elite together in terms of headcount, I think any one member of the big four in the UK alone has a bigger headcount than all of the big law added together.
And they all do very different things in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
So the biggest law firms in China, operate in a fundamentally different way to the biggest law firms here.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Any firm that's done a big merger with a Chinese firm and is now, by headcount, huge, is not necessarily by revenue particularly large, which is interesting. So we've talked a bit about deploying process and technology. I think there is certainly some marketing out there that the Big Four are ahead of big law. I think sometimes justified, sometimes perhaps unjustified. How about expertise? I mean, we've all seen the high-profile recruits, and I think one of the things that law firms would claim, and perhaps Big Four would eschew, is the, I think you talked about the very top end of the work. What about expertise? Do you think there is, when you take away the doing of the transaction, the nuts and bolts, which is probably 70% of litigation or big transactions, which can be automated, done in-house, multi-sourced, whatever, that top 30%, how much of that do we think the Big Four can currently do?
I mean, I don't know how much they can currently do, but I think if you look at the sort of, back of a beer mat model, they want the 70%. They're not really interested in the glamour work. The law firm, it's a bit about vanity, isn't it? We've got the leading expert in X, Y, and Z, and that's great. And as far as I'm aware, the aspirations of Big Four are not to get into that space. They are to take the 70% and the bulk and package it up and do it efficiently and bring in big law and the big name in that area when they need them.
So are they just as at risk as big law in terms of that 70% from Alex, from technologists, from clients doing it themselves?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. The question is, do they have the capability to build these products in-house more than a law firm?
And the answer, I think, is yes, they do. They must be among the top organizations in the world who can take that 70% and deploy people, process, and technology effectively to make money out of it. Most law firms don't do that because they're still filling in timesheets. And a smart law firm would be celebrating the arrival of fixed fees, and yet they dismiss them as down market, not relevant, it's not what I do, I'm an artisan, blah, 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 blah. But the Big Four should be able to take that and process it.
Is that a current view? I mean, certainly conversations I had both at our former firm, and we used to think fixed fees were our friends. I mean, one of our big disappointments where we imposed fixed fees and then the client would go, that's very interesting, how much is that per hour? I mean, I do think there's been a fundamental shift in this point. I think that's quite an old view. But on the cannibalisation piece, Rohit, you're probably...
I think the dynamic will change. So right now, all of the Big Four are saying we have experts to open the door. Whether it's employment law, employment work or tax, we've got the people who can open the door. So we don't need the legal partner in this. We need, the 70%. But that's going to change very quickly because of the amount of competition there is for that 70%, as we've already said. And then they'll be faced with the choice of, do we start to try and pick off some of the other high-value stuff where we have client relationships, but we've never really gone near the legal stuff, but we could try and say, in the same way as we've gone from audit to professional services and risk management, now can we do some legal for you? And inevitably they'll win some. Is it going to transform legal? Probably not as much of a threat as the new law is, I think.
And on that, when we spoke last week, Rachel, we were talking about liability, and you mentioned the 3 million de minimis cap on under the SRA. But if they get into that top end of the work, this is the thing that I always find interesting, is when they get into this end, that really top end, 3 million is not going to cut it, is it? It's going to have to be either 250 million or uncapped or whatever. And it's that, for them, that's quite a different business model to their traditional model in terms of their ability to cap liability.
Yeah. I mean, risk appetite is another reason why they may choose not to go down that route. So I don't know. I think that from what I've understood about how Big Four have grown over the years, exactly as you say, moving into different areas, they're very much driven by how quickly can we make money. It's not a glamour issue.
No.
It's about delivering a service for a good price to a client that will make them lots of money. So if it is uncapped liability, that's not their bag. We'll work with a law firm who will accept that.
Martin, I'm going to go to the audience in a minute, but have you got anything on that?
So I think there's a number of ways these guys could go. That they could just buy the law firm that they want and kind of keep it as an insider operation, buy its PI and everything else that they need to make that work, or they could go the partnership model. They could, I did hear rumours about a PwC Denton's merger, which would be really interesting. That might shake things up a bit in a very interesting way, particularly with the Chinese dimension. I don't know. It's difficult to see their play.
China's an interesting market for legal because I think they just don't value lawyers generally. I mean, that's definitely a market where I think someone's saying something.
Some would say.
I won't say that, but you know, in a market that's cheap and delivers a cheap solution, I think it's incredibly appealing. I mean, again, Daniel and I had a situation where a client wanted to do a deal over WhatsApp. Do you remember that? You know, they didn't want to document it. They literally wanted to do the deal over WhatsApp. We've got, the board says 10 minutes, but I think we've got 7 minutes so that I live up to my 3 minutes. I've picked out Alex. Is there anybody else in the audience who wants to chip in on this, pose something we've not discussed?
There's a chap at the back there had his hand up earlier.
Sorry, what was there?
There's a chap at the back there had his hand up earlier.
We'll come to you next because.
So I was just going to react to the comment about liability caps, etc. I'm not sure that that's as big an issue as you might think, because generally speaking, people don't really want to sue their law firms for negligence, and so typically that doesn't actually happen. So you know, within Sky, we've got 150 in-house lawyers, you know, working every day giving advice. None of them have any indemnity insurance whatsoever. Because what's Sky going to do? You know, we're giving advice all the time. We just live with that. We just self-insure that. And that's what I think, you know, big corporates do. I just want to also react to the comment before. There's a kind of discussion here about how to improve efficiency in the giving of legal advice. But of course, legal advice is not really an end product in and of itself that anybody actually wants. What the product that they really want is managing risk. So the bigger question is not, you know, how can I get slightly cheaper advice about particular transactions? The bigger question is, how can I use these new tools to work out the great swathes of my business that don't need to be touched by legal at all? And that's really, I think, where things are going to go.
I mean, I think, Rohit, that's where you kind of started off, really. I think we were...
Well, yeah, I think that there's going to be a split between the law firms, and the accounting firms. Those who go after the new strategic, high-value advisory opportunities, and those who go for just other versions of the transactional stuff in the marketplace. And the big one that we can see coming is that if you look at the trend that's starting in UK firms of starting to lay off the workforce, either because we're just not competitive enough, or because technologically more advanced competitors are coming in, or because we're going to use AI more and blockchain and everything. So you've seen BT do it, Mothercare, Royal Bank of Scotland, Marks and Spencer's. You know, that trend has just started. Dixons have just given their warning today. We also saw something today about the first UK fully automated investment fund that's got more than €1 billion under management. So you're just seeing those shifts start to happen. What that's going to mean is that UK tax income is going to go down at the same time as more people are going to be wanting unemployment benefit or guaranteed basic income or something. We're going to need to take more tax out of the economy. I'm pretty much certain that no party is going to volunteer to raise taxes, but what we might start to do is to get much stricter on collecting just what people should be paying under the law. And the tax authorities know who they should be going after. They could well start to put that out to tender to law firms and accounting firms to say, why don't you start to go and chase these people and bring them to justice, because you know where the bodies are buried, you know this, and then you'll win. You'll be on a no-win, no-win, no-fee basis, and you could see a lot of that coming Some of the bigger players might go after it, maybe a lot of the mid-tier will, but I think that will be people saying that's something for us to shift to that's transactional for the next couple of years to see us through, rather than trying to do the really hard stuff of going after strategy. The other thing I think you'll start to see is people playing more and more in the grey areas, where it's not clear whether the firms are in the shadow economy. And you see a lot of that at the moment with the transactions going on, with initial currency offerings, with cyber currency, with some of the blockchain stuff that's happening, and organised crime starting to move into that space. It's a huge revenue opportunity, and I think you'll see more people starting to play in that space because the law is very unclear.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in terms of the panel, we're discussing a particular element. If we had longer, we would talk, and we were talking about this earlier, it's not just actually about managing risk, it's about releasing opportunity as well. And legal is often missed as an opportunity for that, but sadly not a subject for this panel. But very quick question from you, and I'm...
Actually, you covered it. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, Rahit's point covered it. Thank you.
Okay. Do we... Anything closing, or are we going to let Daniel come back? And I'll keep my promise to Daniel, which is the first time I've ever done that either. There we go.
Panel. Well, those of you that made it to the end, you've had a day of extraordinary density of information. The last thing you want is me and my crappy jokes putting another 5 minutes on your day. I was amused that we ended with this incredibly radical idea from Rohit, though, that law firms might be a solution to the declining tax take in the economy. I think more likely we need to be taking more tax from capital rather than labour. That's probably my view. Probably not very popular. Anyway, thank you all for your attendance today. Thank you to all of the panellists and contributors who are still with us. Go and enjoy a very well-deserved drink, a cigarette if that is what you require as well. But thank you all for attending. No, thank you very much.